The coalition says it's supposed to be cheaper and more reliable, but today the nation's leading scientific organisation has declared nuclear power in Australia is in fact more expensive and less reliable. So are the opposition's nuclear energy plans heading for the bin? Nuclear power. It's the coalition's latest obsession.
Nuclear power plants are beautiful things.
It's a cry of common sense.
They look wonderful.
Here's Peter Dutton chatting about it just yesterday.
It's cheaper, it's more reliable, it's zero emissions.
But then today, a mighty curveball in the shape of a new report from the CSIRO and the energy market operator AEMO.
The CSIRO has completely torpedoed this uncosted nuclear fantasy of Peter Dutton's.
Its findings? A large-scale nuclear plant will take at least 15 years to build, cost up to $12 billion and produce electricity at twice the price of renewables.
The CSIRO has given nuclear absolutely the benefit of the doubt, and they still come up with a conclusion that it is 2 to 4 times more expensive.
Coalition incredibly unfazed.
Well, we've heard this from the CSIRO many times before.
Including in December, when the CSIRO released a draft report which found small modular reactors advocated by the opposition would be far more expensive than renewables, coal or gas, prompting Dutton to question the credibility of Australia's leading scientific organisation.
It's not relied on. It's not a genuine piece of work. It doesn't take into account some of the transmission costs.
If the Australian government can't rely on its own in-house financial engineering and scientific experts, who are we going to rely on?
This time round, the CSIRO came prepared, addressing the coalition's concerns, not only factoring in the opposition's new favourite power plant size, large ones, it even added $16 billion worth of transmission lines to the cost of renewables. And renewables still came out cheaper.
The Gen Cost report isn't costing coalition policy. It's simply a model that uses particular assumptions and particular inputs.
Probably because the coalition is yet to reveal its official policy.
But can I assure you of one thing? We will announce our policies before the election, not afterwards.
And ever unflappable, today they dug in.
Well, if you look at the top 20 economies in the world, Australia is the only economy that hasn't adopted nuclear power. Just ask yourself the question, do you think those 19 countries have got it wrong?
The Labor plan right now is to wrap this country in transmission lines.
When you include nuclear energy, well, you find that your energy costs come down, your bills come down.
And it's going to make sure that we don't get the blackouts and brownouts.
So will the opposition's nuclear dreams ever die?
The end result is that the energy prices for Australians will increase dramatically and permanently, both in the near to medium term while we wait for nuclear to be built, and then once it's built, we'll permanently lock in ultra-high energy prices for Australia.
Nationals Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie joins us now. Bridget, the CSIRO says it will take at least 15 years to kickstart this and cost up to $12 billion. Do you think it's got it wrong?
Well, I think they've produced a research paper, Sarah, that has a whole lot of assumptions under it. What we do know is that at COP28 in Dubai last year, the globe decided they needed to triple nuclear power generation if we were actually going to get global warming restricted to that 1.5 degrees by 2050. We've got uranium in our backyard that we export to the world. And if we're serious about hitting that target of net zero by 2050, we have to have renewables in the mix, we have to retire our coal generation over time, and we need to make sure we've got a reliable energy source like nuclear power generation available for us so that we can keep the lights on, keep prices low, and keep those manufacturing jobs that are very energy intensive onshore.
Just that COP28 commitment that you spoke about, though, that's a global commitment, and that would make sense for countries that are already doing nuclear. It's surely not asking a country like Australia to find the more expensive way to reduce emissions, right?
Yeah, well, Wally, there's two issues I'd like to sort of broach on that. One thing is the transition to net zero by 2050 has been costed by the University of Melbourne and Princeton and others, UQ I think it is, to be in excess of $1.2 trillion. So this is an expensive undertaking that we're prepared to make. So the numbers you're talking about for nuclear generation are also going to be similar for renewable energy generation over time. Just on the other thing, when you said it's already countries that have nuclear as part of their energy mix, the reality is there are 50 countries who don't have it part of their mix, who are actively seeking to invest in it and explore it. as a really viable and credible option for a net zero future.
But it might make sense in other countries. Australia's a very different country. It's a massive country with relatively few people in it that is very spread out. Every time we ask experts, every time we ask the CSIRO, when John Howard asks Ziggy Switkowski, who's no opponent of nuclear power, he's a nuclear physicist, they all come back with the same answer, which is it's too expensive, it takes too long.
Well, you know, Waleed, I was over in the UAE. I saw that they actually made the decision to go nuclear and they had it up and running in under 12 years.
Yeah, the UAE is a
exciting.
tiny country.
Yeah, but
So
Waleed,
it's not a comparable situation.
Well, it actually is if you're going to cite the nuclear power generation where we already have existing transmission lines. We've got the rollout of renewables being stalled because of environmental concerns right around the country. So the Labor Party is not going to hit their 2030 target. We want to put a plan on the table that's serious, that's credible, that has global technology that is tried and tested, and we want to put it in places where it can automatically plug into those poles and wires which already exist, rather than carpeting our prime agricultural land with 28,000 kilometres, Waleed. That's a lot of transmission lines, still yet to be built. We don't know where they're going. They have no environmental approval, no approval from Indigenous landowners. That's all still got to come. So the idea that somehow we're going to get that done in the next couple of years, you're kidding yourself.
It's not, we're talking about a couple of years. Look, we all want a credible response. No one disagrees with that.
Yeah, good.
The problem is that the CSIRO is saying this is not credible. This is the nation's
That's not what the CSIRO
but I'm sorry,
said,
I'm sorry
Waleed.
that when you compare cost for cost and you compare the even reliability they brought into the picture, AEMO, the market operator, is singing from the same song sheet. We are talking here not about, you know, some random tin pot think tank. We're talking about the nation's leading scientific organisation. This is an independent organisation. Their stuff is peer reviewed.
Yes,
if you're not going to take
I
their
have
advice,
a science degree. I understand how the CSIRO works.
Great.
There are a number of
problem with
assumptions.
them?
There are a number of assumptions under here. One of them on page 90 says that the nuclear power generator doesn't actually have an asset life that it actually does. So any research, as you know, is only as good as the assumptions underpinning it. What the report also says is that we can absolutely have nuclear power as part of our energy mix as we head towards 2050. That it is not debunking nuclear power as a zero emission source of reliable energy. And what the Gen Cost report is about is a report to people who want to invest in energy production, not people who want to see their prices go down.
Senator, is there anything that would have to happen that would make you think that nuclear isn't the right option?
Well, I've travelled to France, the UK, the US, Canada, around the world, and I've seen the ability for nuclear to actually deliver zero emissions, reliable energy and low cost prices to those constituencies. So I don't think it's about renewable or nuclear. I just think as we head towards 2050, we'd be crazy to not follow other developed countries and have our own nuclear energy production here so we can keep manufacturing jobs onshore, because the reason they're leaving isn't because we've got cheap electricity. They're leaving because our electricity is too expensive. So over the decades, we need to get the prices down, the reliability up and the emissions to zero, and nuclear can help us do that.
So now, always fun to have a stoush with you. Thank you very much for joining us.
See you guys.